I'm joined here by David Alan Grier of the IEEE. David has just given a stimulating keynote talk at lunch on the first day of the conference, and we have a few questions for him on that subject as well as his broader interests in computing. First of all, referring to your talk today, David, you've covered the various areas of future directions in IEEE.
Yes.
Could you perhaps just outline for us what those are?
Well, yes, I talked about smart grid, green ITC, green computing and communications technologies, life sciences, how we use these new technologies for diagnosis and patient care. I also talked about the Internet of Things, or as I've been talking about it for the past week, the Web of Things. I talked with a Wall Street Journal reporter who said, oh no, the Web of Things is much more new than the Internet of Things. And green ICT, there's one more that I missed in there. Transportation, smart transportation systems, and autonomous vehicles. And what I think is interesting about all of these activities is that they are highly consumer driven, and that they are asking us to restructure our social lives, our position in society, our function, our status, those things within organizations. We're asked to change norms of how we behave and how we think about things. And all of them involve some sort of economic or market mechanism to get consumers to behave in different ways. And while we've had some of these things before, we're really seeing these things accelerate. And it's really showing how technology is changing societal structures and changing organizations and how people work together.
Now, you mentioned three key points, psychological, social, and economic. Could you explain how these work together in the context of your talk?
Well, yes, sure. What these things are the basic elements of human behavior. There's a fourth that we throw in it that's political. And for much of what we deal with technology, political and economic are pretty tightly allied. What happens when we develop a new technology? It changes society by working through one of these venues. For example, in Smart Grid, we now deploy market mechanisms to get people to use electricity at the right time, to make plans about when they should use electricity, to think about if they are going to be a provider of electricity, how they can work together. And those things are restructuring. In our breakout session, we heard about companies that are now banding people together who create electricity from solar cells and other means to be virtual power plants, because their output is now aggregated, and we can aggregate it and put it on the market. That makes for a new way of people to operate. And that's one of the ways we get new social structures. The psychological, we have norms, we have common ways of thinking about things, or we behave because we anticipate that others want us to behave in certain ways. For example, in cars, we have a driver, and we expect that the driver is the leader of the car and makes decisions. What happens when the driver is not steering it, not controlling acceleration? Who decides on destination? How does the destination work? What happens about changing destination? That will involve social structures about how we change as families and as people together. And then finally, there's social organizations. And when you take apart a social organization, it's a collection of people who have positions in it. They relate to each other in different ways. They have functions. They have things that they do. And they have status. And that's kind of their ability to influence others. And we've already seen a generation come through that knew how to use smartphones better than their parents and their peers. And they all of a sudden became influential for no good reason other that they could do some stuff that others couldn't do. That has done a certain amount of restructuring, and it's parallel to what's been going on for 20 years. That knowledge of how to make digital technology work changes the way you relate to others.
Very interesting. Now, all of this technology, somebody's got to program it. What are the challenges, and what do you think are some of the key factors here to consider?
Well, this is one of the things I've been studying for the past year quite closely. I've been president of the IEEE Computer Society. And one of the things we see as a change that is desperately needed is a unified set of standards for how program developers, program assistants, the leaders of this field need to behave, the knowledge that they need to have, and how they need to work with each other. And we have created a body of knowledge, which we call SWEBOK, Software Engineering Body of Knowledge, and have been working to make sure that programmers in the United States have that body of knowledge, as do programmers in China, in India, in Eastern Europe, and in Russia, making sure that when you get a piece of software, you know it's done by someone who has that skill. In the United States, we have a very recent example of what happens when you don't have that skill. The current administration rolled out a website that was for its new health market, and it failed miserably. They have been very tight-lipped about who did it and why. Well, we know who did it, but the teams that did it. But the things that I have had leaked and the pieces I began to put together were that these were people who did not have solid software engineering training. In standard software engineering practice, you anticipate that coding, writing the program, is only going to be about 40% of the work you do, and that debugging should be about the same amount of time. And there were stories that the company that did it, the week before it was released, started the debugging process. And either they didn't know, didn't plan, or got behind, and all of those indicate a weakness as developers of software. They also lost the contract this morning, I noted.
And finally, a controversial topic which you touched on, which is automation. Automation of jobs that have otherwise previously been at some skill level, whether it's a low skill level or even a higher skill level, such as medical advice or legal advice. What are your opinions on this?
Well, technology changes the nature of work and nature of skills that you need in the workforce. There are a couple of Harvard economists, Murnham and Levy, that sort of describe it as going like this, that as far as we can tell to date, technology has not decreased the number of jobs, but it has radically changed them. It has created for the leadership class much, much higher standards, because you need to know how the technology works, how to plan, often how to deal with human problems, and how to be a good manager. And these are much higher than people needed before. The middle class, people who had some skill and did some work, that has been squeezed, and squeezed substantially. There still are jobs for them, but some of those people are pushed down into jobs that are more rote, that require less leadership and less skill. Overall, the number of jobs seems to remain the same, but the nature of the jobs change. And certainly while there seem to be roughly the same amount of leadership positions, the skills and training and background required for those positions are higher. And not just technical training, managerial training and human skill training.
Well, on that encouraging note, it just remains for me to thank David Alan Grier for a stimulating keynote and for taking the time to have this interview with us. David, thank you.